like to quickly introduce our head table. To my left, your right, Mike Clare from the National Wrestling Hall of Fame state chapters. To his left, distinguished member going in tonight, Dick Griffin. Representing a distinguished member going into the hall tonight, Congressman Peter DeFazio. Gentleman to my left, if you're looking at me, my right, Peter Fuller. To my right, a gentleman I affectionately call Coach Jim Peckham. To his right, a gentleman who I've learned to call Coach in the last year or so, Coach Myron Roderick. Next to him, Coach Rick Moyer. The esteemed gentleman, Coach Carl Adams. And last but certainly not least, Father John McLaughlin. At this time, I'd like to ask you all to please remain standing. We will have our national anthem sung by Sergeant Trooper Daniel Clark from the Massachusetts State Police. Dan Clark.
Ladies and gentlemen, imagine, if you will, that the year is 1814 and this nation is at war. You are on board a ship sailing towards the enemy fleet, that same enemy that just burnt your nation's capital to the ground. Your mission is to win the release of a prisoner of war, a respected physician, and your friend. You board the British flagship, and after intense negotiations, they agree to release your friend. However, you all remain captive because of the battle that is about to take place. On the morning of 13 September 1814, the British fleet begin a bombardment against your homeland, the likes of which have never been seen before. Rocket after rocket, cannonball after cannonball. For 25 hours, they pound on. But through the night, you're able to look toward the shore, and you can still see the stars and stripes flying in the breeze. And in the morning, the bombardment ends, and there is silence. And as the sun comes up over the horizon, you look toward the shore, and you can see that the troops of Fort McHenry have raised American flag that is so large and so grand that each of its 15 stars and stripes measure 2 feet across. A flag that is so magnificent it cries out, "This is the United States of America." You are so moved by this show of guts and resolve, you write the following song. Your name is Francis Scott Key. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. This is the great Lee Greenwood song, Proud to be an American.
If tomorrow all the things were gone I worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife, I thank my lucky stars to be living here today, where the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. That I'm proud to be an American, where at least I'll know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston and New York to LA, where there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say that I'm proud to be an American, where at least I'll know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I'll know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the
Ladies and gentlemen, Sergeant Daniel Clark, Massachusetts' finest. Thank you, Dan. The next person I have the pleasure to introduce. Back in 1976, I was dropped off in Boston, Massachusetts, just a kid out of Jersey. And I kind of tripped over a state champion from Vermont, and he said, yeah, I'm going to go down and wrestle. And I said, well, gee, I'll go wrestle with you. Where are we going? He says, the BYMC Union. I said, okay, let's see where that is. And we walked in, and we met this guy, and geez, I was about 180 pounds at the time, and he was probably about 175 pounds, and says, son, you know how to wrestle? And I said, yeah, I wrestled in New Jersey. I said, never thought I was going to wrestle in college, but, you know, I can wrestle. And he says, okay, show me what you got. And for the next 5 or 6 years, I got beaten on just about every day of the week. And 1976, September, was one of the best days of my life. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the day I met Coach Jim Peckham, our president of the Massachusetts chapter of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Good evening and welcome to the third state chapter of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame induction ceremony. We are inducting an outstanding group of individuals whose achievements and efforts in behalf of the sport of wrestling have ennobled not only themselves as individuals, the institutions they represented, but in doing so, each earned the right to the accolades they are about to receive this evening. At this time in our nation's history, the recent events of September 11, I think it important to mention the ancient Greeks, those people who gave us the idea, the concept of democracy, got wrestling so noble a sport they made a law that all their youth must attend the palestra, or wrestling school. For they believed, and rightly so, that wrestling would not only teach us much about ourselves, but help to instill those qualities we most admire in men, in people. Courage, perseverance, mental toughness, strength, stamina. Then they set an example of courage that men will memorialize as long as men create and write history. When 300 Spartans in a defile in the mountains held that pass against Xerxes' army of 300,000 men, I would remind you that of the three greatest minds of antiquity, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Socrates was 3 times an Olympic champion, as any bust of him will attest. Plato, whose real name was Aristocles, Plato meaning broad shoulders in Greek, comes down to us through the ages known for the breadth of his shoulders, for he too was a wrestling champion. And Aristotle spoke in praise of wrestling and wrestlers. Thus, I believe it fair to state the men we honor here this evening walk in the footsteps of immortality. One last point. I would mention that in the 1,200-year history of the ancient Olympic Games, no woman was ever allowed to witness any of the contests, as all men competed in the nude. In the 2004 Games, women will compete in wrestling for the first time ever, thus ennobling those very same qualities of courage, perseverance, mental toughness, and strength and stamina we would want to enhance and develop in men, deserve and serve just as rightful a place in our wives and daughters and granddaughters. Now, I wish to thank the committee for their efforts in putting this event together, but most especially Mike Testa, former captain at Emerson College, in charge of special events for the city of Boston. He is also the director of reservations and historic sites for the Metropolitan District Commission. Believe me, if Mike doesn't know every contact person in the city of Boston, he knows who does. Mike, my deepest appreciation. Next. Next, Mike Clare, National Coordinator for all the state chapters, for his efforts, concerns, counsel. Thank you, Mike. And lastly, my old Olympic teammate, Myron Roderick, former Director of Athletics, head coach at Oklahoma State, now the Executive Director of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. Dedicated, caring, and one of the toughest competitors you'll ever shake hands with. Of course, coming from Oklahoma, I suspect he thinks all you folks up here in the Boston area kind of talk funny. Now, I was in Russia, and I don't remember where we were, Azerbaijan or Belarus or Georgia. And I looked at my watch. Practice was running late. I said, man, you got 20 minutes. Get the 3 S's out of the way. Now pick up your gear, get your act in order, and get a move. Otherwise, we're going to be late for chow, and I don't want to be late for chow. Now get going, you all. A big, tall Russian woman was the interpreter, standing there. And she said, and what did he say? And these two guys were from Okie. They're probably cousins of mine. They spoke up as if they had rehearsed it in unison. Said, ma'am, y'all gotta understand, he's from Boston and they don't speak English so good. With that introduction, I will introduce my good friend, former Olympic teammate, Myron Roderick.
Thank you, Jim. I wish we didn't have to go back that far. What, 56? I was a young kid, just graduated out of Oklahoma State, and 40 years later, there's a lot of people didn't think I graduated. But I took wrestling for 4 straight years and made B's in it, got me by. But I met Jim, and I thought Jim was an old man at that time because he was bald, and he's a vegetarian. I did not have any idea what a vegetarian was. I grew up on a farm in Kansas, and if we didn't eat meat and potatoes and green beans, we didn't eat. So I just couldn't figure out why somebody wouldn't eat meat. Well, about 6 years ago, I got talking to Jim, and I said, Jim, you know, you were 50 years ahead of anybody else in this business because you knew then that eating meat wasn't good for you. I said, you're going to live to be 150 years old. And about 4 months later, he called me and he said, Myron, I got some news for you. He said, I had 5 bypasses. You don't know how good that made me feel, Jim. So I kept on eating meat. I didn't go vegetarian. It's indeed an honor for me to be here tonight and honor the people that we're inducting into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. We started this 7 or 8 years ago to recognize lifetime service people throughout the United States because we felt that it's important in our sport that we recognize the people that really make wrestling happen. And that's not the national champions or the Olympic champions or some coach that wins 8 or 10 national championships. That's the person that day in and day out is spending their life to help some young person out there become a better wrestler and a better person. And that's what this is all about. And again, I just want to congratulate the inductees. You know, I'll have to put you up on the wall in the Hall of Fame, and I go by there every morning and turn the lights on. That's how important I am at the Hall of Fame. But it'll be fun, and we want to congratulate you on being inducted. Have a great evening, and see you, and come to Oklahoma.
Myron was telling you he'd see you at Stillwater, Oklahoma at the Hall of Fame. Well, I had to get out of there about 4 o'clock in the morning to catch an early morning flight out of Oklahoma City, and I got in my car and I left Stillwater, and I hit the one traffic light in Stillwater. It was blinking, of course, and I didn't see another light for about 45 minutes till I got outside Oklahoma City, and I think I hit about 6 cows on the way, probably. But if you do get a chance to go to Stillwater, Oklahoma, please, you'll really enjoy it. And I know I got to say one more thing about that guy. Right now we got Cael Sanderson, who's everybody's glamour boy right now. He's our guy wrestling, and you know, at the Nationals we watched Dan Gable, and right before Cael Sanderson got up there, and man, the emotion that must have went through Dan Gable watching Sanderson take that podium. But on my left side in the seats was this guy, and before Dan Gable, he was the winningest wrestling coach in college wrestling, and you can't take that away from him. So that's Myron Roderick, folks. Yeah. And another guy who sort of prides himself, I don't know if he's the winningest, one of the winning, well, yeah, he would be one of the winningest wrestling coaches. I know 1983, my kid from Catholic Memorial, we're in a heated match with Woburn, and darn it, the kid throws his headgear, we lost a point. Don't you know I lose the match by 1 point? Otherwise, I would have tied down in a pit over at Woburn against Coach Johnny McLaughlin, and that's how far back I go with this guy. And then he went in the seminary and got this funny collar on, and you know, and but he's a great guy. Ladies and gentlemen, Father John McLaughlin.
I gotta lower this thing. Thanks, Mike. That was my first match ever coaching, by the way.
The only time I had a chance to beat you.
I was so happy I bought that kid dinner afterwards. So nice to be here tonight with so many people being inducted and not indicted. Don't tell the Cardinal that one. Such a privilege to be here with such an incredible group of champions. The only way I could get up here was to be a priest. That's why I went in here. There's no other way I'd get on this table. And actually, is Mrs. Adams here? Mrs. Adams, can you stand up for a second? Mother, you know, this is the woman that produced one of the greatest wrestlers. I met her before I was a priest. You remember me, Mrs. Adams? Let me do this. Now, I'm going to tell you why I'm a priest. Remember that night I came to New York with Carl? We spent the night, 2 days there together. After that, I went to confession. I became a priest. I'm not going to tell you what happened. But actually, I'm supposed to, I have to say a prayer, don't I? Yeah. Keep going. No, I don't know what the... You know, the one thing I wish that Trooper, is Trooper Clark here? He's not here. I love that first song, the Star Spangled Banner's the greatest song. And it really, boy, you were ready to wrestle after that, weren't you? The other song I'd like to hear him sing is, Father, you can go, even though you were speeding, there is no ticket. Amen. Well, Peter Fuller's here, and I've always wanted to meet him because he's loaded. I'll talk to you later. There's a few things I need. So we begin in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. We ask Almighty God to send his blessings upon all who are gathered here today, and all the wrestlers and parents and families who are unable to be here. We ask you, Lord, to bless the food we're about to receive. Bless those who serve this meal. Bless those who go without. We ask you to bless this great sport of wrestling, all the wonderful people involved in it. We ask all this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
I'm going to ask the wait staff to begin serving dinner. And by the way, Father McLaughlin, Joey and Maria's wedding downstairs. You're doubling tonight. They need you down there. Yeah, Joey and Maria's. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy dinner, and we'll be back in a few more minutes with some awards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Testa.
You're welcome, David. Tell your dad to put that on his desk in his office, all right? How's that soup? Pretty good there, huh? All right. David Biondolillo. Thank you, folks. I know he wrestles. Doesn't everybody wrestle?
I thought I was second on the list, but I see that I'm first. Mr. Testa, inductees into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame, and honored guests. I was indeed honored when asked to participate in the induction of my very dear friend and mentor, Mike DeFazio, into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. I was fortunate to have been Mike's assistant for several years. At this time, I would like to share with you my thoughts of Mike in the role that I knew him best and the role that Mike loved the most, and that is the wrestling coach at Needham High School. Mike taught and coached at Needham in the Needham school system from 1934 to 1969. Except for the years that he was in the United States Navy in World War II, retiring from the Naval Reserve as a lieutenant commander. Mike was unique in that he was the major force in the development of Massachusetts high school wrestling starting in 1934. And then after the war, when there were only one or two high schools having the program, it was with Mike's initiative and urging that we got the programs going again. He loved his wrestling. The 1966 Scholastic Wrestling News, which is a national publication, as you well know, referred to Mike as the pioneer of high school wrestling in Massachusetts and recognized him as the dean of wrestling in Massachusetts. He was inducted into the first MIAA Wrestling Hall of Fame. I think of Mike as the Pied Piper of wrestling in Massachusetts. During his tenure as wrestling coach at Needham, starting in 1934, Mike's teams compiled a record of 194 wins, 73 losses, and 6 ties. His teams won 4 state championships, and he developed several state and New England wrestling champions, some of whom are here tonight to honor their coach. Mike finished his wrestling career in 1966 in a manner fitting to his role as a developer of champions and of men. When his last 2 teams compiled a record of 23 wins, no losses, state championship, and the New England championship in 1966. When congratulated by the Scholastic Wrestling News for his accomplishments, true to Mike, his reply was, all of that was gratifying, but it is much more important to me to have the sport now fully accepted as something really worthwhile. If Mike was only here tonight, I'm sure, and knew how the sport has now developed here in our state, I'm sure that he would be pleased. Some of my personal remembrances of my dear friend, I didn't want to just get into all the statistics and all of that, but being with Mike for these years, and all of you coaches can understand this, I used to, in the matches, Mike had me sitting to his right, like where you are today, Mr. Peckham. Mike was not a loud, boisterous coach. Mike was not one who was running up and down the mat shouting instructions to his boys or baiting the officials. But when we were in a tense match and things were going in our, either he wanted, or our boy was trying to, with a Nelson or a Chickering, trying to turn that guy around, Mike then started to move around. Now remember, I'm on his right. And when it came to either turn that guy around or to prevent it, that elbow started. And I would get that elbow in my ribs time and time again. I took more of a beating in any match than any one of the Needham High School wrestlers. He was a great fella. The other thing I think of Mike when I think, and I go out and I watch matches and that, and I think of him, is that when, after a match, or doing a particular weight class, and if our boy won, if the Needham boy won, Mike would be the first one to go out with a hand, shaking his hand, I remember, arm around the shoulders, and patting him on the back, saying, good job, and so on. All coaches do that. Well, he was no different, but he loved his boys. But the important ones were the boys who lost. And when the boy would shake hands in the middle of the mat with his opponent and then start off the match, head down, Mike would meet him, hand out, arm around his shoulders, and if you listen carefully, you would hear, get your head up. You did your best. You're going to win the next time. Get that head up. And you could see the Needham kid walking off the mat then, back to the bench, wiping his face off, but he would be sitting there with his head up because he knew that his coach, Mike DeFazio, had all of the confidence in the world in him, and he would win again. Mike instilled in his boys the never-say-die attitude of a champion, and he provided them with not only his personal example, but he provided them with the wrestling tools that was necessary for them to achieve that goal. A more personal thing, in 1966, when Mike retired, and that, as I was telling I was telling George here tonight, I was walking down the hall, and Mike came up to me and put his hand around me and around my shoulders and said, have a good time next year. And I figured, what? Hey, next year. I mean, have a good team next year. And I said, well, fine, but where are you going? He said, I'm not going anywhere. You're the coach. I almost dropped dead. Here is probably the finest wrestling coach, and one of the finest wrestling coaches in New England and Massachusetts. And he's telling me that I have got the team that he has developed and that. So in the matches, then, Mike, being in the phys ed department, would be taking the tickets at the door of the main gym in which we wrestled. And he would take tickets for the basketball games, gymnastics, and all that stuff. And then with the wrestling, I would look over, and I'd see Mike sitting on the chair, looking and watching the match. The only thing I could think of at that time,
Congressman, thank you. Right.
The only thing I could think of at that time is, for God's sakes, Griff, don't screw it up because he'll kill you. He was such a gentleman, but he never, when I would say, Mike, how did we do? He would sometimes say, fine. He would never, I'd say, well, what did I do wrong? He would never tell me what I did wrong, and God knows I did a lot of them. But that, he developed wrestlers and champions, and he was developing me as a coach as well. The last time I saw Mike was in the Massachusetts General Hospital. He retired in '69, and this is 1970. He had developed leukemia, and a couple of the other coaches and I had gone up to the hospital to see him, keeping in mind, now let's keep a stiff upper lip. Let's not get our heads down. We got off the elevator, and standing in front of us was Mike DeFazio. And we expected to find him in bed in the whole bed. He'd been having transfusions almost daily. And we said, hey, Mike, how are things going? Oh, fine, yeah. How are things, what are you doing? Well, he said, you know, I deliver the papers in the morning. We said, what do you mean you deliver papers in the morning? He says, oh, yeah. He said, you know, to the fellas and that around here that can't get out of bed and are having trouble. That was Mike. Right to the end, here was a gentleman now that was always helping people. 3 days later, Mike passed away. He was a great man, and we at Needham often said that Notre Dame had Rockney, Needham had the DeFazio. At this time, his son, Peter DeFazio, will accept for Mike the award and plaque for his induction into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame.
David, I need two more gentlemen. Coach, Myron, photo shoot.
Are we all right? Yeah?
Close together.
Oh, I'm sorry. I might say that Peter is the congressman in the House of Representatives from the state of Oregon, and I'm sure Mike would have been very, very proud of him.
Thanks, Coach Griffin, and thanks to the Wrestling Hall of Fame for recognizing my father. It was a long time ago, but I'm pleased that there have been a number of people in the audience, other than the group I came with, who remember my father, were inspired by my father, much as I and many others were. It was, it was 68 years ago that he actually started public school wrestling, Needham High School. When he died, I got a lot of letters from a lot of people who had inspired. He was a coach, teacher, ran a camp in the summertime for inner city kids down on Cape Cod. And this one gentleman who was particularly moving sent me a letter saying, not that long after your dad left for the war, he said, I too went to the war. He said, I want you to know that your father was my last hero. He said he was a great man. He inspired me. He said, but after you go to war, you really don't have heroes anymore after that experience. He moved a lot of people in his life. I've got to say, I don't think I'd be in the United States Congress if it wasn't for the discipline of wrestling and the tutorship of my father. And you've heard some good anecdotes. I'm not going to belabor that, but I do remember I had a nemesis. I was a pretty good wrestler, captain, co-captain of the team. We were state champs the year, came in second in New England's the year. I was a co-captain, had a pretty good undefeated streak, but then I ran into one guy I couldn't beat from Weymouth, Ron Roulette. Some might remember him. And he was a tough guy. And so I was in the same region, same state, so I ended up, I lose to him in the regional, so I get seated badly in the state, and then I end up in his bracket in the state, and how the whole thing goes. So I was always third, but I was pretty discouraged by being third and not being first, and actually I was in the consolation round in the state tournament, having lost to Ron, and I really wasn't putting my heart into it, and I was down 3 points with about 20 some odd seconds to go, went off the mat, and my father comes up and says, you can do it. And I said, what do you mean I can do it? I'm down 3 points, it's 28 seconds to go. He says, you can do it, you can win. He said, you can always win. You can always win. You've just got to focus. You never give up. And sure enough, I reversed the guy, got a near fall, and won and came in third. And I've thought of that a lot since. I'm a Democrat in a district in Oregon that voted for George Bush, and I came in 28 points ahead of Al Gore. So, there's something to that technique that I use daily in my job and in representing both in Washington, D.C. and representing myself to my constituents in Oregon. It's an extraordinary sport. I think one that I just would encourage and continue to encourage young people to become involved in. That's nothing like being out there on the mat alone and competing. The discipline you learn there, and the determination, whether you win or lose, can carry you through an incredible amount of adversity through your whole life. So thanks to all the coaches assembled here who have inspired hundreds, thousands of people. And thanks to the Wrestling Hall of Fame for this recognition for my father. Appreciate it.
I sleep real good at night knowing you're in Washington wrestling with Dennis Hastert every day, and a lot of good wrestlers in Washington. Ladies and gentlemen, they're going to be serving dinner shortly. Please enjoy your dinner. We'll be back with more awards. Breenie, we said hi to Otis. We're okay? All right, Otis. All right. Timmy Fallon? Timmy Fallon just went that way. Here he is over there. Oh, there he is. There we go. That's what I'm here for. Anybody didn't see anybody tonight you want to yell to? Okay. All right. Gives me pleasure to bring up this next presenter. And by the way, I was informed by Myron Roderick that any presenter that goes over 2.5 minutes, it's $100 every 30 seconds donation to the National. We now own the football field in Needham. Anyway. No, honest to God, Toasty, did I tell him 3 minutes? All right, just so I'm not the guy. Whew. You should have seen Toasty's face during that whole thing. It was white for a change. Because it's always beet red. All right. So anyway, back in 1976, Commonwealth Avenue was a pretty hopping time. I went to a party at this old big warehouse up by the BU Bridge, and I didn't meet my wife there. I think I met my wife a couple months later, but it was a Halloween party, and we were all dressed up, and everybody said it was Fuller Cadillac, and all I know was this big old warehouse on Commonwealth Avenue. Fuller Cadillac, what's Fuller Cadillac? But as I grew older, I went over to Watertown and bought a Grand Am off you a couple of years later when I got married, and so we helped the family a little bit. But the next presenter, Peter Fuller Jr., to present to his dad. Peter.
Thanks, Mike. Today is a special day for my father and his family and friends. To see him inducted into the Massachusetts chapter of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame with many of his heroes and contemporaries, men like Coach Peckham and Harvard captain John Harkness, and tonight's honorees, wonderful coaches and wrestlers who contributed so much to the sport, is quite an accolade. Sickly as a child with a digestive disorder that left him with a bloated abdomen and underdeveloped physique for most of his early years, he literally built himself into a heavyweight through his physical regimen and work ethic. Early mentors like Louis Andrews, Dad's coach at Milton Academy, helped guide and shape his confidence and wrestling knowledge, ultimately resulting in his winning 2 state titles and being named captain and top athlete in his class. At Harvard, as a heavyweight wrestler, he never lost a match in the indoor athletic building, placing in the Easterns and competing in the NCAAs at 5'10", 190 pounds. Never a technically superior wrestler. My father relied on a handful of tried and true moves and fantastic shape and conditioning that helped him dominate late in the match. He was an early disciple of Jim Peckham's credo of earning the right to win. Chief Boston, the Harvard wrestling coach, said of my dad in an article from 1948, "Pete is the most sincere, hardest working wrestler we have. He is also the best type of captain that any coach could ask for." Incredibly, at the same time he was pursuing his wrestling exploits, he was also enjoying his second favorite sport, amateur boxing. He compiled a record of 55-5 with 30 knockouts and was the New England Golden Gloves champion. The New York Herald Tribune described him in an article written in 1948 as one of the nicest young men ever to beat somebody's brains out. That same year, at age 25, he won the New England Olympic trials in both boxing and wrestling as a heavyweight. His love of sports and competition ultimately led him to the racetrack and thoroughbred racing. In 1968, Dancer's Image, a horse he owned and bred, won the Kentucky Derby, going from last to first in a thrilling finish. Years later, in 1985, his top filly, Mom's Command, named for his lovely wife, Joan, won the Filly Triple Crown with his daughter, Abby, aboard. She was the first female jockey ever to win the Filly Triple Crown, astounding the New York racing pundits. For my dad, the lessons learned on the wrestling mat and in the boxing ring were carried with him to all the other facets of his life, helping him cope with the inevitable disappointments and successes that life brings. Hanging on his wall in his office is a favorite quotation from Teddy Roosevelt about the man in the arena that perhaps sums up my father's life on the mat, in the ring, on the track, and in the business world. And it states, "The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause, and who at best knows the triumph of high achievement, and who, at worst if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat." Are you crying yet, Dad? Yeah. Fellow wrestlers and wrestling aficionados, it is my pleasure to introduce introduce my father, Peter Fuller.
We'll set up a photo with Myron and Coach. Coach, Myron, stand up for the photo, please. Bryce, Peter, just take one step back with your son.
One step back. And you can hold it, actually, Daddy.
I can hold it.
I gotta follow that guy? Holy mackerel, I can't do that. My son, my son. You know, my wife has heard me give this speech so many times that she said, well, what do you need a paper for? And I said, well, you know, this flows freely sometimes, but other times I begin to take my words very seriously. I know you guys don't, or you folks won't, hopefully. So, you know, if I sort of stutter and stop, it's not too much boxing. It's just too much of this crowd. And what a great bunch. I see my daughters already laughing at me. You know, 7 daughters, 1 wife, 1 son. I believe in women's lib. So obviously it's a great honor and satisfaction to be here with these fellows, and Carl Adams, my Lord, my Roderick, Jimmy, and a friend here, Congressman from Oregon, and Dick. Great coach, followed in Louis Andrews' steps. Who could follow in Louis Andrews' steps? Only Dick Griffin. Really, I mean that. Because Louis was such a special, wow, I better leave that for a little later in the story. Wrestling has always been my favorite sport. Boxing, my other sporting indulgence, as you all know, can have more painful endings. You know, in wrestling, you lose, you get pinned. In boxing, you lose bad enough, and you're looking at the ceiling. It's not that much fun, sometimes. Now, that only happened to me once, fortunately, but that was at Ridgewood Grove with a guy named Coley Wallace, who later played Joe Louis in the Joe Louis story. So you can see I was lucky to escape with my life. Anyway, Petey, you know, my own Pete was a wrestling champ, and that was due perhaps to, he picked wrestling, of course, as a sport. Now, whether that had anything to do with me or fooling around with him when he was 2 or 3 years old and starting him wrestling, I don't know. But the people that really made him the champ, and there's no fooling about this, was Jimmy and Gene and his wrestling brother, Matty. Terrific. Matty Peckham. A lot of fun. So Pete was a wrestling champ, and that was fun. I began scuffle wrestling at Dexter School. You know, every weekend, not quite. Every recess, we would go out, and I had a guy named John Motley. He lived just opposite me on Beacon Street, big deal. And John's dad apparently was a favorite historian, famous historian. But John and I would wrestle, go right into the holes, didn't know what we were doing, but had an awful lot of fun. That's the old Dexter School on Lake Street. And then I went to Milton. Got to take a long breath on this one. And then I met Louis. Now, Louis was the kind of a guy, and other people have said it beautifully, but Louis was the kind of a guy that would put his arm around you and say, "You can do it, Peter." And you believed it. And you know, basically, that's a lesson that everybody that's here in this room, every wrestler here in this room, and wives, the wives are the best, you know, they have to come to the matches, and the girlfriends, you know, understands that. You can do it. Hey, it means that no matter how tough your guy is, you're going to try to do it and do your best. So anyway, that was his message to me. And I went on from Milton and went to Harvard. And there I had a completely different coach, a guy named Chief Boston, EIWA wrestling champion, heavyweight. I think he knew fewer holes than I did, and that's not many, you know, because I didn't have many holes. But Chief was a wonder, had a great personality, put wrestling on the map at Harvard. He was really marvelous. And I had had a year in Dartmouth, thanks to the Marines, wrestled up there for a little bit. And I think that two of the things that I was proudest of in wrestling was that I beat a guy in the NCAAs from Oklahoma A&M. Now, I got to say that for Myron here. had to mention it, and he said, "You must have been lucky as hell," when I whispered it to him, and I probably was. His name was Grover Rains. I'll never forget him. Yeah. So anyway, that was a great thrill. And then the other great thrill, and I'm still not sure how this really happened, but I went the route with Henry Wittenberg when he won the Olympics in 1948. Now, whether he let me do that or not, who the hell knows? But our score was 12-6. He obviously took me down 6 times, and I got away. And was lucky to do it, and damn lucky to do it. So anyway, when training stopped, and then I went to that big warehouse on Commonwealth Avenue that somebody spoke about there, and did so well. And incidentally, what a great party you put on, boy! I want you at my funeral, I'll tell you that. I mean, this guy's good. He's great. But when I went to that big warehouse and Dad put me in charge, I worked my way up from vice president to president. and I had a great time there. But you know something? Selling Cadillacs is profitable, but it doesn't really build you up tremendously. So when you go in the AAU matches, which I continued to do, and you get beaten, and then you get pinned. I'd never been pinned. Boy, that's not too much fun, as you all know. I have here a great hero of mine. I want him to stand up. You see how wonderful the guy still looks. He won the NCAA championship at Harvard. Come on. You know who we're talking about. We're talking about John Harkness. Where is he? There he is. He's a wonder. He's another guy. I never scored a point against John. He never pinned me either, but I think, again, that was one of those nice things that Harvard guys learn, not to pin each other, maybe. And while I'm talking about Harvard, I want to just have a fella stand for a minute, and he placed me in Paradise. I was a little young to go to Paradise at that time. That was last year. His name is Coach Jay Weiss. Jay, come on, stand up. Harvard coach. Absolute wonder. There he is. And you know, at Harvard, when any of us placed in the Easterns or something like that, it was like raise the flag for Hudson High, you know? I mean, that was absolutely terrific. He won the Easterns with Harvard last year. So in the end, good to sit down and spare you guys any more tears and any more remembrances. got to remember, if you try hard, you put everything you got into it, you got a hell of a chance to win.
Peter Fuller, ladies and gentlemen, Peter Fuller. Carl Adams. Let's see, about 1982, coaching at Catholic Memorial, Toasty says, "Come on, we're taking the bus. We're dropping the mat off over at BU." So what are we dropping the mat off? We're not wrestling at BU. What are we doing? No, we're loaning them the mat. One of our kids gets to go to camp for free. We just got to give him the mat. So could you see me and that guy loading the mat by ourselves in a bus? We did it. Then again, you wrestled 190? Wow. Okay. Anyway, that's how I met Carl Adams that first summer. And since then, Dave Green would always call me, "Hey, Mike, get a proclamation from the mayor. Carl's got another All-American." And we did that for Toddy Giles and Studer. But the guy who's going to present here, I don't remember doing one for Earl Walker. Earl, did you get a proclamation from Ray Flynn when you became All-American? No, huh? No, huh? I don't know. I must have missed him somewhere. Dave, what happened? Anyway, to present the award tonight to Carl Adams, Earl Walker, All-American.
Well, I'm still waiting for that proclamation, Coach. But let me begin by saying I'm very honored to be here and to present to Coach Adams his induction into the Hall of Fame. Of course, Coach is very humble. So he doesn't like to hear a lot of stories about him and his accomplishments. And I'm going to get to a few of those, but I just have to tell one quick personal story. Our athletic director from Boston University has given me 2 minutes. So I may go a little bit over that, but I told him I'd wrestle him for it afterwards, so I think I'll be okay. Coach Adams, to me, I know him as the man that saved my wrestling career. I was about to walk away from the sport in 1992 as a 19-year-old at my physical prime. But an interesting thing about Coach Adams is I was at Brown University at this time, and he may wonder why I tell guys I'm an old man, and I'm only 29 at this time. But he taught me that being old is not a bad thing. So I always tell our wrestlers that we coach now that I'm an old man. And this is the reason why, and he's probably wondering why, so I'm going to tell him. When I was a freshman at Brown University, I was a starting 150-pounder. I'd broken my ankle training over the winter vacation, and so I was out for the season. Boston University came and visited Providence, Rhode Island, and Coach Adams came along with his wrestling gear. And our then starting 150-pounder, 158-pounder, 167-pounder, 177-pounder had the privilege of wrestling Carl Adams. I was sitting in on that practice, and things just looked a little too easy. I thought maybe the guys were taking it easy on him or something. And I said to myself, come on, this is ridiculous. You can't let this old guy beat you up like this. So for a year since then, over the summer, I recovered, I rehabbed my ankle, and I was wrestling the following year. But for a year, our 150-pounder, 158-pounder, 167-pounder, 177-pounder called this man Superman. And I'm saying, come on, this guy is old. This guy is old. Superman, okay, so I'm licking my chops for a year. I'm going to just take this guy out. So the next year, I'm a sophomore, and I'm really thinking I'm in my prime. At this time, I'm thinking, okay, there's no one in the country that's faster than me. There's no one in this country that can take me down from the feet. And he comes in, BU comes down again. They're training for nationals as well as Brown was. BU comes down again to wrestle with BU comes down to wrestle with Brown University. And I'm ready to go now. So I step out on the mat, and I'm feeling good. I'm young and fresh. That's why I call myself old now. It's better to be old, trust me. So I step out there, and I was just telling the guys at the table, the worst beating I've ever taken in my life occurred. I'm going to tell you about it. So I step out there. Coach Adams, he's smiling. Okay, I'm going to kill this guy. He looks like the Jolly Green Giant. Yeah. Okay? So I get out there, and within about the first 5 seconds, this is the first time I've ever been thrown from my feet to my head directly, with about 3 seconds hang time in between. All right, he got lucky. That's good. That's good, old man. This is serious now. I get back up. About 5 seconds later. 3 seconds hang time in between. Feet to the head. I think they call it a foot sweep. I learned later. After I transferred, he told me what he did to me. Now I said, okay, anybody this good on his feet can't be that good on the mat. I'm going to take this old man. Now it's really serious now. This is all business. He gets on top of me, and I couldn't move. And I'm thinking as I'm down there, okay, not only is he good on top here, he's trying to hurt me. No, you know, in fact, he's trying to kill me. Have you ever been defenseless? This is one of those times. And I said, you know what? Later on that summer, after school at the end of the season was over, and I was about to walk away from the sport, I took a little trip home to Delaware, where I'm from, and I told my parents, I said, I don't know, I think it's time to give it up. This old man kicked my butt. It's time to walk away from this sport. And the next night, I found this BU packet, Boston University packet, laying on my bed. My mother had put it there. And I'm going to tell you about some of his accolades and achievements, but I'm going to tell you why my mother put the Boston University catalog on my pillow so I could see it that night. She said to me, this isn't because he kicked your butt a few months ago. She said, this is because when Brown University wrestled Boston University, and I would sit up in the stands and watch you wrestle, she goes, I like the way he carried himself while he was sitting in the corner. I like the way he carried himself as a person, as a human being. I liked his character. She said, so if you're going to walk away from the sport, you're going to do it knowing that there's someone out there who may give you a chance to really prove just how good you are. I called him up the next day and I said, hey, you got a spot? I don't think I can make 150 anymore, but I can wrestle 158 for you. So I transferred to Boston University. And to this day, as I continue to work with the BU team, I now tell the guys, I'm old. Take it easy on me. Because I learned that it gives you some kind of advantage. I don't know if it's psychological or what, but if I can just have a little bit of what he had that day, I tell you what, I'm going to keep telling guys that I'm old, okay? Now I'm just going to go through it quickly if I can. My 2 minutes is up, but I'm going to go quickly through some of his accomplishments. Carl Adams first attended Brentwood High School in Long Island, New York. While wrestling for Coach Joe Campbell there, he went undefeated in high school, undefeated in dual meet competition. He became the first state champion for that high school. At the age of 17, he went to Iowa State University. In 1969, the NCAA passed legislation allowing true freshmen to compete at the NCAA tournament. Before then, it wasn't allowed. He was the only freshman to earn All-American honors that year, placing fifth. The only freshman. The first All-American freshman in NCAA history. He went on to become a two-time NCAA champion, winning the tournament in 1971 and 1972. Iowa State then won the NCAA tournament 3 times while he attended there. He was voted team captain his junior and senior year and was selected as the team MVP in 1972 of the NCAA championships. He also won the prestigious Midlands tournament out in Illinois 3 times and was selected as a chartered member of the Midlands Wrestling Hall of Fame in 1993. In the year 2000, he was voted one of the top 30 Midlands wrestlers of the century. That's 100 years. Okay, just wanted to check in with you. Iowa State then hired him after he was done competing in college, as an assistant coach in 1973. During the next 6 years, he assisted Iowa State in winning 2 NCAA championships, producing 7 NCAA champions, and coaching wrestlers who accounted for 37 All-American honors. While coaching at Iowa State, Carl was also busy doing just a few other things. Okay. He worked on completing his master's degree, wrote 2 instructional wrestling books, and he invented the wrestling machine, Adam. I don't know if you guys know about that, but you probably have one in your room, Adam, the takedown machine. The Adam machine is still on the market today and is considered to be one of wrestling's greatest innovations. During his Iowa State coaching stint, he won the National Freestyle Tournament in 1973 and again in 75. He also wrestled in the World Championships in Russia, placing 5th in the Pan American Games in Mexico City, winning a silver medal, and he competed in the World Cup in Toledo, Ohio, placing 3rd. In 75, he was National Mat News named National Mat News Middleweight Champion of the Decade. That's 10 years. They do teach us something at BU. He's been the head coach at Rhode Island at Boston University for the past 25 years. Amateur Wrestling News named him Rookie College Coach of the Year after his first season at URI. His teams at Rhode Island and Boston University have won 12 conference titles and were runner-up 6 times. 87 of his wrestlers have qualified for the NCAA tournament, and 5 have become NCAA All-Americans. He has been voted Conference Coach of the Year on 4 occasions. Since arriving at Boston University, he has written his 3rd instructional book, produced 9 one-hour instructional wrestling videos, and over 18,000 young wrestlers from all over the world have attended his world-class wrestling institute. Carl and his wife, Linda, have 5 children, ages 6, 17, 16, 30, and 31. And they reside in Rosendale, Massachusetts, and they're seated at this table over here. Beautiful family. Again, it's an honor for me to present, as I call him, Coach, and he'll always be Coach to me, Coach Adams, with this plaque as he's inducted to the Massachusetts Wrestling Hall of Fame. Let's hear another round of applause for the old man.
First, I want to thank Earl. Earl, fantastic job. Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you. First, I want to give thanks to God for blessing me with so many great opportunities. And before I move on, I want to thank the Hall of Fame for inducting me into the Wrestling Hall of Fame. I would also like to congratulate all of the other inductees in all of the classes that have gone before us. Congratulations, guys. When I was thinking about what I was going to say when I got up here, you have to do a lot of reflecting. And I started reflecting back, I'm 51 now, I started reflecting back over 50 years. It's kind of scary. And I think a lot of you guys were here probably, 3 or 4 years ago when Coach Parker was up here, and he was talking about that green banana. I don't know if you remember what he said, but he said he kind of felt like a green banana and he didn't want to get right. Well, I kind of know what he was talking about. Anyway, thank you. Anyway, two themes kept coming to my mind. The one was that I could never get back to wrestling, what wrestling has given to me. Second one, I have so many people to thank for their help along the way. So I'm going to start out by thanking my parents. I want to thank them for their guidance. They've been tremendous role models. I want to thank them for their love and just supporting me for all these years. Thanks a lot, Mom. I want to thank my wife, Linda. She's here tonight for her support. She's been a great partner. She's been a great mother to our children. And a lot of coaches won't admit it, but you have to have a real special woman to support you when you're a wrestling coach, or any coach for that matter. Coach Peckham can tell you a little bit about that, right, Coach? I want to thank my brothers and sisters for their support over the years. Actually, I have two brothers, one older and one younger. And when I was in 10th grade, my older brother, Eddie, was a senior in high school. And Eddie would keep me grounded. He would kick the crap out of me all the time. So when my younger brother, Ron, got into 10th grade, I would turn around and I would kick the crap out of him, just because I thought that was the way things were supposed to be done. I want to thank my relatives who are here tonight. They drove all the way in from New York, and I really appreciate their support over the years. They've always been there for me. My sisters are here. I have two twin sisters. They used to do a lot of yelling during the matches. And the thing about my sisters is, because we had so many cousins and the Adam brothers were going to Brentwood High School, they never had to worry about anybody picking on them. I want to give a special thanks to our athletic director at Boston University. And I'll tell anyone this. He is the best boss any coach could work for. He's been so supportive of the sport of wrestling. In fact, he's here tonight, Gary Strickler. Thank you, Gary. We appreciate your support. I want to thank the high school coaches, fans, and all of the Boston University supporters. I want to give a special thanks to the high school coaches, because you guys, I would say especially in the state of Massachusetts, you do a great job. Your commitment to the kids, your commitment to the sport of wrestling is incredible. You know, when we get those kids, you know, they have a pretty good foundation, they have pretty good skills, but when you get them, a lot of them can't walk and chew bubble gum. So you take them from ground zero, and then we get to take them from there. But I just want to say you do a great job, and you deserve a lot of credit for it. The best thing about the sport of wrestling is the people who are involved in the sport. I am so impressed with people like Coach Peckham, Dave Breen, Mike Testa, Larry Tremley. I can just go on and on and on. Tom Bartasek. You guys do a tremendous job supporting the sport of wrestling. And 99% of it is volunteer work. But you are tremendous contributors to the sport of wrestling. And that's one thing that all of us can appreciate. My personal involvement in the sport of wrestling has been one of luck. I think being in the right place at the right time, and just having great mentors, coaches, and friends. I had a very good junior high school coach. And just to give you an idea of what kind of people I had an opportunity to work with, he would literally put me in his car and drive me to C.W. Post College when I was in 8th grade, 14 years old. On the way down there, he would be telling me, Carl, we got to get you a better workout. And I'm thinking, I'm going to get my butt kicked. But anyway, that was the type of coach he was. I had probably one of the best high school coaches to ever come out of the state of New York. Coach Joe Campo. This guy was incredible. The summer of my junior year, He took me around to all of these regional tournaments. I competed, won a few trials, got to go to the national tournament, and then I was off to Europe for 2 weeks. And that was like an experience of a lifetime. But if it were not for this coach's commitment to the sport of wrestling and to his wrestlers, I would never have gone to Europe. It was the best time of my life. Like I said, right place, right time. Somehow I ended up at Iowa State. And I always ask myself, how lucky was that? To end up at Iowa State at an era where the team won 3 national championships. They were runner-up 1 year, my freshman year at Iowa State. Out of the 10 weight classes, 9 wrestlers were All-Americans. And then we had Dan Gable on the team to boot. So I feel like that was so lucky, you know, and I feel so good about being lucky and being a part of that program. So I graduated from Iowa State, got my degree. Now I'm trying to figure out, what am I going to do? So I'm thinking, hey, okay, I have a physical education degree, I have a driver's education degree, and I'm thinking, I'm going to be a driver's education teacher. That's what I want to do. And it was getting late in the year. I was on a 5-year program. Most of the athletes were on a 5-year program at Iowa State. Spring is rolling around, and Coach Nichols comes up to me and he says, Carl, you know, I'd like to hire you as one of our assistant coaches at Iowa State. He goes, I'll pay you $600 a month in cash. I'm thinking, He said, but you got to get your master's degree. I'll pay for that too, in cash. So I'm like, okay, twist my arm. So again, you know, this is the type of person that I had to work with, and this is the type of thing that is done by people who are really committed to the sport of wrestling and to their athletes. So over the next 6 years, you know, I kept wrestling. As Earl mentioned, I wrote a couple books, invented the wrestling takedown machine. And after my stint at Iowa State, hey, Tony, how you doing there? That's good. That's little Tony. Tony's 6 years old. You
said 16, right?
He's 16. I got to tell you a quick story about Tony, and then I'm going to move on. A couple days ago, I'm in my living room, and Tony comes up to me and says, Dad, what you doing? I said, oh, Tony, I'm working on this speech that I'm going to give at this Hall of Fame thing. And he said, Daddy, am I going to be in your speech? So I said, yeah, I'll put you in there. So anyway, hi, Tony, how you doing? I'll see you in about an hour.
You better see him quicker than that.
Now I can go home tonight. Lastly, I just want to share some of the things that I've learned from the sport of wrestling. All sports supply us with a certain degree of skills that we need to be successful in life. But I honestly feel, I think the gentleman up here would agree with me, that wrestling probably does it better than any other sport. The lessons that you learn from wrestling are predictable. They happen automatically. They are unavoidable. And they are so profound that they become a part of the way that you function on a daily basis. The lessons that we learn in wrestling are, you know, we learn that we have to take risk in life. You know, you don't shoot, you don't score, therefore you don't win the match. Wrestling teaches us that we cannot be afraid to fail. I feel like that's so important. I tell my wrestlers all the time that, you know, you may have to take 7 shots to score 1 takedown on the average. So that means that you're going to fail 6 times before you finally get it right. And that's a tremendous life lesson. You know, the fact that you're going to fail That's going to help you get it right. And because you fail, that means that you have to persevere. You have to stick with it. You have to keep trying to do it. You have to keep trying to get it right. Wrestling is a great teacher as far as that goes. You have to work hard. There's no question about that. If you don't work hard, you won't last one day in the wrestling room. You have to commit yourself to the sport of wrestling. You just won't last. You won't accomplish anything. You must compete to the best of your ability. You know, it's not like basketball where you can go out and play a pickup game. When you wrestle, it's for real. It's important every time you step on the mat. So you have to compete to the best of your ability. And I think one of the main things that wrestling does is teach us humility. You know, if you've been in this sport any length of time, you learn that there's someone out there who can kick your butt. So you're not going to win every time. And I think humility is a good trait. I believe that these are the lessons that bond everyone in this room tonight. And these are the reasons why we come together and celebrate the sport of wrestling and all of the people in it. Again, thanks to the Hall of Fame, and thanks to all of you guys for coming tonight.
I don't know. He started in Long Island, went to Iowa State, Rhode Island College. And talk about being lucky. We got him here at Massachusetts at Boston University. Carl Adams, ladies and gentlemen. We're lucky. We're lucky. Dick Griffin, coming up next. You didn't think you'd get to this time. You were talking to me earlier about that. But to present to Dick Griffin, and quickly I might ask, Stevie, I'm sorry to put you on the spot like that, but we're running late, but we'll get there. Guy who runs a great program at Roxbury Latin down in West Roxbury, Steve Ward. Steve?
Tough act to follow. Can you imagine having Carl Adams as your driver's ed teacher? I would be a much better driver today, I have to say. I also would like to know if Tony would like to go to Roxbury Latin. It is an honor and a privilege to be able to introduce Dick Griffin to this illustrious gathering. I'm reminded of a similar gathering that took place not many years ago when another great athlete of his time was being inducted into his city's Hall of Fame. On the hill section of St. Louis in 1949, Yogi Berra stared out into the crowd, cleared his throat, and with a loud voice declared, "Thank you for making this day necessary." Borrowing from Yogi, I would like to thank the selection committee for making this day necessary for the induction of my friend Dick Griffin into the Massachusetts Wrestling Hall of Fame, the National Hall of Fame Massachusetts chapter. I've been at Roxbury Latin for the past 26 years, and therefore have coached against Dick Griffin's Milton Academy teams for over 20 years, dating from 1976 to 1997. During those 20 years, when our teams met head-to-head, I would resort to any means possible to attempt to defeat Dick's teams, but usually to no avail, as Dick himself often reminds me over and over again. I tried to emulate his techniques and use them against him. That didn't work. I sent my wrestlers to his camps. That didn't work. I sent my wrestlers to the camps that Dick sent his wrestlers. That didn't work. I got him drunk on the way to seating meetings. That did work. That's true. But his team still won the tournament every year anyway, but his wrestlers didn't usually get seated very well. Dick has even accused me over the years of resorting to treacheries that I could have never thought of on my own. He's the only coach that I know who kept a set of screwdrivers in his med kit because he believed that he needed them to adjust my scale. He kept a tape measure. These are true, too. He kept a tape measure in his med kit, and it would endlessly measure and remeasure the circle on my mat, trying to prove to me that it was too small. When I finally ordered a new mat a few years ago, I called Dick and offered him the opportunity to give the mat company the measurements that he wanted for my new circle. Now, I thought I was joking, but he gleefully accepted my offer. Even after all of this, I could never find any way to beat him at anything. I finally got one major triumph to relish after so many years of defeats. One summer, Dick and his long-suffering wife, Ellie, invited my family to his summer home in New Hampshire. And he told us that we could bring our dog, a tiny but extremely obnoxious 8-pound Shih Tzu. Dick had at this time a huge but easily intimidated Labrador Retriever. It was with great glee that I watched our little Tiffany chase the Griffin family dog off of his own porch repeatedly the entire weekend. Suffice to say that little Tiffany provided me with my only satisfying victories over Dick Griffin for numerous years. There are, however, many reasons why it is necessary to induct Dick Griffin into this Hall of Fame. First, he's a great coach, and he deserves this honor. Dick's record as a coach speaks for itself. He coached in both public and private school leagues during his tenure as a varsity wrestling coach. He won 3 Cape Ann tournament. He won 3 Cape Ann tournament championships and 3 dual meet championships while at Hamilton Wenham in the early 1970s. At Milton Academy, where he was head coach for 22 years, he amassed an overall record against all comers of 221 wins, 65 losses, and 7 ties, and soundly defeated his ISL foes at a rate of 187, 42, and 4. In his prime, from 1979 to 1988, he led his teams to 10 consecutive ISL dual meet championships, 7 Graves-Kelsey tournament championships, and 1 New England prep title. This gives Dick's teams a winning percentage of 75% for his career, with 14 league dual meet titles, 10 league tournament championships, and 1 New England title. This alone makes it necessary to honor him today. But there's more to this man than his record alone. Dick Griffin is not only a great coach, but also a superb classroom teacher of history, a wonderful father to his 2 sons, Matt and Cub, a devoted husband, and also a great friend. Additionally, he was without doubt the most personally courageous man that I've ever known. It took me a long time to figure out what made Dick so successful. But now I realize that it had a lot to do with the model that he set for his wrestlers. Many of you probably are not aware that Dick battled with lymphoma for much of the past decade. And when I say battled, I mean battled. Cancer tried to knock him out first in the early 90s, when I remember visiting Dick at the Dana-Farber Institute, where he received a bone marrow transplant. I remember scrubbing up, putting on a white gown and a mask just to get in to see him. No matter what type of shape he was in, though, and at times he was literally on death's door, he would always be cheerful and positive and would talk not just about the past, but also about the future. Even the nurses remarked what a uniquely positive individual Dick Griffin is. Over the years, Dick's attitude, persistence, and courage have allowed him to score numerous victories over cancer, and he's even coaching once again. He's won victory after victory in contests that are much more important than wrestling matches, and in my estimation is one of the most inspiring people that I've ever met in my life. No wonder his teams always won with him as a model. Dick Griffin today goes into the Hall of Fame not just because has amassed an admirable record, but because he's a man of integrity, of substance, and most of all, he has inspiring courage. Dick, my friend, it is necessary that we pause today and honor you this evening.
it's a little overwhelming to be here, and I would like to speak to both things that Steve mentioned. Last Sunday, I was in a hall like this where they were giving awards to platelet donors at Dana-Farber. I had been invited by a friend at school who started giving platelets in my name at Dana-Farber at the time of my bone marrow transplant in '93. She was the donor speaker, and she had amassed a total of 175 platelet donations, which take about 2.5 hours, which means that she was giving about 20 donations a year. I was really knocked flat, however, to see a room full of people who are being awarded for having donated 20 each over the course of the past year. And suddenly it hit me that I owed my life to them. Because from '93 till about '99, I received platelet donations totaling 300 and 200 red blood cell transfusions. I literally was alive because of the selflessness of these people. I realized that that fit right into my wrestling career. I also want to thank all of those people. By the way, if you ever want to do something that is unbelievably meaningful for a person, these donations are life-saving. And I would like to thank my family, my friends who gave me the support to get through this time, and especially a wonderful, wonderful team of people at Dana-Farber. In fact, I learned something with cancer. I learned that for me, it wasn't fighting cancer, because getting it is like stepping onto a roller coaster, and you're somewhat helpless. All you can do is say, I'm a cancer patient, smile, try to look at the fun things in life, around the tears, and stay vertical. And I am so grateful for all of those people who helped me to do that. So I'm the product of a whole bunch of people. I am extremely fortunate. And it was the same way with my wrestling career. I am probably the most unlikely person to ever stand in this spot. I didn't know what wrestling was when I went to college. I grew up in southeastern Massachusetts. I went to school in the Midwest, had a little wrestling in PE my second year. I loved it. I went out for the team. And I'd like to think I was blossoming when I graduated in my senior year. That's not true. I was a JV, but the sport had gotten its hooks into me. When I got my first teaching job, I was hired as a history teacher, and I had decided that I wanted to get closer to kids, so I also decided that I wanted to coach wrestling. And in those days, 1970, there weren't enough coaches around, and Hamilton Wenham hired me with 0 coaching experience and a total technical knowledge of a side roll, a switch, and a vague notion that wrestlers should be good on their feet. Therefore, my whole career was going to be a group effort. And I want to mention some people who represent the many people who helped me as I began to coach. Tom Flaherty, sitting right down here. We happened to move just before I went to Hamilton Wenham. And as luck would have it, Tom and Fran, who would become our close friends, Tom was a wrestling official and had coached wrestling and was on his way to a Hall of Fame career in football. I literally lived in his kitchen. I pestered him daily. And he became and is still my coaching mentor. Another person who never wrestled in his life inspired me and helped me greatly. He's right here. The sun is shining on his head. He's shorter than I am. He conned me into coaching freshman football, and I knew less about that. But out I went, and I discovered that this man, Norm Zanaboni, or Boney as we knew him, was an unbelievable talent. He was an incredible motivator of kids. Very corny, but you would not believe what kids would do for him. Example, and this is where I learned to be passionate about a sport. We were playing our traditional game against Ipswich. We had had a great season. We were lucky. We had a bunch of athletes. We only had 3 plays, and they carried us. And just before the game, Boney said, watch this. He got 30 kids. We had some big kids, all in uniform, in helmets, and he stuck them in a 15 by 15 room in the gym. He gave them a couple of words of inspiration, and then he pulled out an Ipswich shirt, which he had stolen somewhere. And he said, guys, I want you to do to this shirt what you're going to do to Ipswich out on the field. You know what happened. We had 4 injuries before we ever got outside. But you should have seen those guys play. And it was at the end of that season that Boney helped me recruit about 22 outstanding athletes from that freshman football team who joined with some veterans and formed the backbone of the Hamilton-Wenham teams. Without that bunch, I don't know where my career would have gone. Jerry Pay is sitting back there. I was lucky enough to have the same principal in 2 schools. And I want to thank Jerry for becoming an outstanding wrestling fan and for being my biggest supporter as a coach. And I warned a guy that I was going to thank him tonight. He doesn't even know this, but he's been my model, George Bossy. I know that's a little dangerous, but I idolized George Bossy from the time I started to coach. I loved what his kids did. I loved his energy on the mat. I loved it at tournaments when he'd lose his voice and he'd have a kid there yelling and he'd be poking the kid, telling him what to yell. He was great to young coaches. He scheduled us. We were just a little Cape Ann school. He scrimmaged us. He would talk wrestling at the drop of a hat. But the thing I really noticed about George that a lot of people also know is the size of his heart. And I realized here was a guy who was doing an enormous amount outside of the sport of wrestling for those little kids. And I thank you, George, for being that model throughout my career. And this guy right here, we're not going to let him get up and talk anymore, but he has been extraordinarily generous to Milton Academy athletes, and he was the guy when I ran out of my technique, I knew where to send my kids to get them polished, and I really have enjoyed Jim's technical clinics and camps. He's been a great help. There were many, many more. These guys are representative of the fact that I stole and begged and borrowed and stole enough stuff to become a competent coach. I want to answer another question, and that is when you get to a spot like this, you ask the question, what is so meaningful about wrestling? And it's almost as if we all wrote the same speech. The competition is unbelievable. Is there a better moment in sports when a wrestler gets a takedown going out of bounds with no time left on the clock and the referee puts up that 2? Or when he says, the high and the low, and we as coaches and wrestlers have experienced those things in our lives that normal people never experience because of the competition. I love the chase for technique, and I think I also value just as much just being around kids. As you get older, you can't get older because you have to keep up with them, and you have to be just as crazy as they are. And it's a great way to spend one's life. But actually, when it comes right down to it, I think from this vantage point, the thing that means the most is the news that comes back from wrestler after wrestler. And it doesn't have to do with a coach. It has to do with the sport. I've gotten a bunch of emails over the years, and some recently, and I just want to read 3 or 4 of them, and you'll get the idea. Wrestling gave me the discipline to get through Navy SEAL training and helped me to be disciplined and strong enough to get through a serious helicopter accident when I broke my back in 4 places. Wrestling helped me to make the transition from Iran to the United States. When I get to the 5th hour of a very sensitive brain operation, the steadiness in my hand comes from what I learned in the 3rd period of a wrestling match. One kid wrote, I learned more in the wrestling room at Milton Academy than I did in any class. I can say that here, I can't say it back at school. And I think the one that I really loved just came in. It was a heavyweight who wrestled for 2 years, and he finally won a match. He described that match in detail. It still thrills him. And then he went on to say, if I had known you were going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, I would have listened more. Now, I'm on the last page here, but I've got a couple of stories. One is a confession. We get up here and you see relatively mellow people. I'm going to acknowledge right away that wrestling touched a competitive streak in me that made me rather obnoxious on the corner of a mat. I didn't look like Carl Adams when I first started. And I have a confession to make. Nobody knows this but me. We were wrestling against Tewksbury. Hamilton Wenham was a small school. The Merrimack Valley schools were the giants. We loved to go up there, and sometimes we would get close enough. Once in a while, we'd win. We were in a packed house in the gymnasium. We were actually winning going into 147. Our guy at 147 went out on the mat, quickly got caught in, of all things, a reverse cradle. There was a lot of junior high stuff in the technique in those days, and he was pinned. Well, now we're almost out of the match, and we grabbed the 157-pounder and we said, listen, if you get your leg, protect your head. He went out, guy grabbed his leg, then his head, and in 20 seconds, he was going over the top, and the referee was about to slap his hand on the mat, and there went the match. I lost it. We were sitting, we had a bench, and behind us was a cement wall. I reached down and grabbed a chair, a metal chair, and I chucked that sucker 15 feet in the air up against the wall. But nobody knew who did it. Because as I picked up the chair, the lights went out. And 5 seconds later, the lights came on, and I was standing there looking at the wall with everybody else, trying to figure out what that horrendous noise was. I did go home that night, and I thought, you were a jerk. And a loose circuit breaker or something bailed you out. Don't do that again. My chair went higher than Bobby Knight's, I think. It took about 10 more years for me to mellow. My wife says about 25. And this statement serves as an apology to any people that I might have berated, any referees I might have been too tough on in those early years. The next story I have to tell simply because I didn't dare tell it before I retired. And some of my fellow coaches are out there, and I'm not sure if I should tell it now. I prided myself on weigh-ins in spite of Steve's story about the tools. When I did adjust his scale, I did it in front of his whole team. I thought it was a little off. Of course, I was nailed. We, in the 80s, we picked up a gimmick in weigh-ins. It started at Harvard, of all places, and some of you may be familiar with it. The kids thought that if they stood on their heads for about a minute before weigh-in, they'd weigh less, up to 1/8 of a pound. I went to the physics department. I said, there's no way that can happen, right? And the guy said, no, not unless you're 1,000,000 miles tall. Then maybe gravity can make a difference. Didn't matter. They all got hooked. So weigh-in at Milton was in the morning at 7. We had another one at 8. The boarders would get there at 7 o'clock. If you came into the Milton training room, you'd see 6 guys, buck naked, standing on their heads against the wall, ready to hop on the scale. So one morning, we had the chronic guy who was always overweight. This guy could get on a bicycle and pedal 75 kilometers and lose nothing. He had it down to a science. Anyway, this one morning, he was overweight, and I had to go up to school. So I asked my good friends, Tom Flaherty, Larry Fitzpatrick, who's the trainer, if they would do the weigh-in for me. Sure. So they walked in at 8 o'clock. My man Cooper was still on the bike, and they said, weigh-in time. And Cooper got off the bike, and he started over the scale, And he said, wait a minute, I have to stand on my head. Well, these guys didn't know anything about that. And they said, yeah, go ahead. And they point him to the scale. Now, why this kid did this, I'll never know. But he went over and he stood on his head on the platform of the scale, like this. Got his hands in there. Of course, he kept falling over. He was 6'2", 177 pounds. My friend Tom grabs one leg, and my friend Larry grabs the other leg. And they've got Cooper on the scale, and they let him go, and he wobbles, and they let him go, and finally on the third try, he stays still long enough. They swore he made weight. They didn't tell me till the day after the meet, and frankly, it didn't make any difference. I think it was against Roxbury Latin. Not really. Anyway, I didn't want my integrity to be tarnished. But you know, this may be unusual. This may be the only kid in wrestling history in the United States who actually went through an official weigh-in standing on his head on the scale. Finally, I want to close with some thank yous. First, I want to thank my wonderful family. My wife produced two great sons who wrestled, and my younger son, Cub, came back to help me after my sickness and coached for 4 or 5 years. We had a great experience. We argued more than I argued with Zanaboni, but I was used to it, and we had a lot of fun. And I want to thank them both. I want to thank my daughter-in-law, Liz, Matt's wife, who was so supportive during my illness and has now presented us with grand twins, 2 years old, Sophie and Alex. They've already started to wrestle, and early returns show Sophie as more skilled, so we got to work on Alex. I want to thank my mother-in-law, who is here tonight. And finally, I want to thank my dear partner and my best friend, Ellie, who helped me through the greatest challenges of my life, and also put up with an incessant wrestling conversation which went on for about 20 years. Thank you, guys. There are a bunch of coaches that I worked with over the years. From Hamilton Wenham, Ron Gamond. Dick McClune isn't here, but those guys were amazing help. Brian Cheney, he helped with the younger kids. Tom Flaherty came to Milton and assisted for a while. Tom Bartasek, Neil Keller, Tim Summerfield, Joe Colton. Thank you all. And finally, I want to thank all of the wrestlers and all of the parents and accept this award on behalf of all of you because it truly is a shared award. Thank you very much.
It's my great honor to represent the Wayland Public Schools tonight in honoring and congratulating Rick, and I will read a quick letter from Dr. Gary Burton, Superintendent of Schools, Wayland, Mass. Dear Rick, my schedule does not allow me to join with all the others who will be honoring you at your induction into the Massachusetts chapter of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. This is certainly a well-deserved honor and will serve as still more evidence of your unusual success as a wrestling coach and your obvious love of the sport. It is hard to believe that you have been gone from Wayland for 5 years. Still, your name is mentioned often and always with great admiration and enthusiasm. Rick, you have helped to shape the Wayland schools in ways both obvious and profound. More importantly, you had greatly influenced the lives of countless young scholars and athletes along the way. You are remembered most kindly by those who had the privilege of working with you, while those new to Wayland are told of your professionalism and dedication to this school system. You had set standards for work ethics, sportsmanship, and overall results that few, if any, will surpass. In the true sense of great teacher-coach, you have touched the future through the lives of those with whom you have worked, taught, and coached. Please know that the Wayland Public Schools are proud to claim you as one of their own, and while the honor tonight is rightfully yours, many here in Wayland share in the joy of your accomplishments. Through your dedication to excellence in athletic endeavors, you have made all of us feel good about our professionalism and ourselves. I thank you on behalf of the Wayland Public Schools, and I congratulate you on what is still another milestone in the incredible life of an athlete, teacher, and coach. Rick, please add our names to the many who will be wishing you well tonight. Sincerely, Gary A. Burton, Superintendent of Schools.
I thought he had a letter from the president or something. I don't know. All right, now to really present the award to Rick Moyer from Wayland Schools, Dr. Zimmerman. Doctor.
Distinguished inductees, head table guests, coaches, captains, champions, wrestlers, and the wrestling families that are here this evening. It's a real pleasure for me to present Rick Moyer for his award. You know, I want to tell you that I spent about 20 years on the board of directors of the Massachusetts Interscholastic Athletic Association, including several years as an officer and 2 years as president. And in that role, had to interact with all of the sports offered in the Commonwealth. I must tell you that, and it should surprise very few in this room, that wrestling was and is still my favorite sport. I think it's one of the few pure form sports left in our nation. And a lot of the credit, the tribute, really goes to the coaches and people who make that happen day in and day out. In presenting Rick Moyer to you this evening, I'm not going to cite his Wayland record of over 400 dual meet victories and his overall record in both Massachusetts and New York State is some, I think, 456 dual meet victories, 24 in Wayland, 24 league championships, 22 sectional championships, 13 top 3 finishes in state tournaments, 2 New England tournament championships, nor am I going to mention that he coached over 150 individual sectional and 31 state champions, 7 New England championships and champions, and had 6 high school All-Americans. Nor will I cite his personal record of awards and accomplishments, including a few years ago his being named the National Distinguished Coach of the Year. They're too numerous to mention here. Rather, I'd like to share another side of Rick Moyer, perhaps one that very few of us in this room are aware of. I first heard about Rick at my 3rd Wayland School Committee meeting in 1971 as superintendent in Wayland, when the chairman of the school committee introduced a motion that every single senior, in order to qualify for a high school diploma, must have at least one 6-week sequence in physical education with a person by the name of Rick Moyer. And then he went on to indicate, because of Rick's tremendous expertise as a teacher, his personal, ethical, moral values, and his extraordinary understanding of young people, that every student should be exposed to him before that student graduated. I just as forcefully went on to point out that, number one, it was a scheduling impossibility, and even if it could be scheduled, that whoever this Mr. Moyer was, he could never survive the opprobrium that would descend upon him from the rest of the faculty. We finally beat down that motion. My second encounter with Rick was when I redlined the high school principal's request for 3 assistant wrestling coaches. And I put the notation that a 12-member team should only have 1 coach. That was certainly enough. The athletic director wrote me a note back and said there were 109 kids out for wrestling this year, and he needed 3 assistant coaches. I said, well, this can't be. So I went over to the field house. They have a very large wrestling room in Wayland, and nearing the wrestling room, I heard gales of laughter, followed by loud thumping and grunting noises, then applause, then more laughter. When I went into the room, I encountered wall-to-wall kids, ripped and torn sweat gear, several frantic exercises that bordered on child abuse, and then a pause while Rick stood in the middle of the room and demonstrated how to drive a truck on a farm in upstate New York with all the kids laughing. I watched this for a few minutes. I never did count the kids. I put the assistant coaches back in the budget. And later on, and I wondered why any kid would subject himself to that kind of pain. I later learned that parents, now this is my first year in Wayland as superintendent, I later learned that parents, without the vaguest idea of what wrestling was, said to their freshman boys, make sure you sign up for Mr. Moyer. They didn't know what they were signing up for, just sign up for Mr. Moyer. Rick always insisted that Wayland wrestling be a truly, and these were his words, a great life experience for each kid. Moreover, he spread the wrestling word throughout Massachusetts and even in New England, helping scores of schools start programs, traveling under other schools to conduct clinics for coaches and kids, and inviting many new programs to practice jointly with the Wayland team. Not unusual on a Wednesday or a Thursday afternoon to see buses from other schools practicing during the dual meet season in Wayland High School. They were beginning programs with beginning coaches there to just simply get some help from Rick. And at one point, I had several Wayland wrestlers come to me and say, Dr. Z, we're in real trouble. Coach Moyer is teaching them all our secret moves. You know how kids are. In addition to his skill as a coach, Rick Moyer was one of the finest educators and one of the most extraordinary staff members in the history of Wayland High School. I worked for over 24 years with Rick. Whatever needed doing, he'd do it. His hand was the first to go up. Whether it was to chair a curriculum committee, clean up the campus, supervise a fundraiser, or whatever, Rick would lead the effort. On one occasion, our school committee, in a school that would send 95 to 98% of its kids on to college every year, our school committee was so upset with the guidance department in the high school that it threatened to eliminate K-12 guidance in the school system. We were desperate. I was desperate. And I made a very intuitive move, and that was to move Rick, who had a master's degree in counseling, from a phys ed teacher over the heads of several experienced counselors to be chairman of the guidance department. He straightened that department out in short order, launched a number of very proactive, kid-oriented programs in guidance and counseling, and pretty soon that department became really the star, the jewel of our high school. When our athletic director retired, Rick came to me and said he wished to close out his career as athletic director and coach. And although I took him to lunch and tried to talk him out of that because I wanted him to stay there in guidance, where he had done such a great job for 12 years, I let him finish out as athletic director and, of course, keep his coaching. Rick fostered a family environment throughout the wrestling program among moms and dads, wrestlers, with many brothers on the team, as well as several sons of his former wrestlers. And yet his commitment to his own family was legion. Rick's wonderful wife, Ingrid, and his 3 great daughters were always his most valued life companions, and they, in turn, Rick's most ardent supporters. I'm touched and deeply moved with the honor this evening of presenting the prestigious award to the most outstanding educator, teacher, guidance counselor, athletic director, coach, and mentor of young people whom I have encountered in my 45 years in education. Rick Moyer.
Our granddaughter couldn't wait. She's sound asleep. I know. Mike, do you have my glasses? Thank you very much, Dr. Z. It's an honor and a privilege to receive this very prestigious award, and it's made very special by having it presented by you, Dr. Z. Thank you. I would like to introduce my family that's here tonight, and I'd like to first start talking about my wife, Ingrid. It seems to be a common thread how important our wives are in our chosen profession and the support that we receive. We need this support from our family and from people like our wives, and especially Iggy. Thank you so much. You were wonderful. I had 35 wonderful years of coaching, and I'm sure I've said it many times that without my wife's support, it would have been more like 3 to 5 at best. I'd like to introduce our daughter, Kristen, who's the mom of our 3 wonderful granddaughters. Our daughter, Wendy, and our daughter, Julie, who came from California, flew out last night on the red eye to be here. Our son-in-law, Jay, that had a great run on Monday in the Boston Marathon. We were proud of you. We were there with the grandkids with the signs, "Go Dad," congratulations. Very proud of you. And I was going to introduce Abigail as our most special guest, but she's been asleep for the last hour. So our oldest granddaughter is here. Tonight is sort of an overload of wonderful memory jogs, looking at the coaches that are here and the wrestlers, the parents, friends, and relatives. It's just a wonderful experience to see those people, and I want to say thank you so much for being here. And congratulations to the other recipients. Obviously, from what has been said and read tonight, so deserving. It's a special honor for me to have Coach Myron Roderick here representing the National Wrestling Coaches Hall of Fame. I mean, that's big time. If you're going into the Hall of Fame and have Coach Roderick here, that's very, very special. Carl Adams, I'm the only coach here, I'm sure, that coached against Carl when he was in high school. I was at Amityville High School on Long Island, and Carl was at Brentwood, as was previously mentioned. I know Carl was a fantastic wrestler, and the one thing I remember about our last match is he beat my boy Mickey Gaydosh 18-1. Oh, he danced all over him. And I've watched Carl's career from high school all the way through college and the wonderful things that he's doing now. Just a fabulous person in our sport. I'm currently retired, living in Orleans. We love Cape Cod very, very much. Carl was asking me, he says, "Hey, how do you like this retirement?" And I says, "It's every bit of everything people say it is. It's wonderful." Every morning you sort of wake up in this euphoric state because you have time to do stuff, just stuff, do the boxes of pictures that have been in the cellar for years and years and do the picture albums and things like that. And time really doesn't matter when you're retired. Someone will say, "Hey, Rick, what time is it?" "Well, gee, I don't have my watch with me, but I think it's Tuesday." And you always know when it's Sunday, though, because the paper is thicker. You're always... I'm a morning person. I get up at 4:45 every day and have been since, I guess, the early days of working on the farm back in upstate New York. But I spent this fall and winter, really a fun thing. I wrote the history of Wayland wrestling. I'm probably the only person who'll ever refer to it. But I entitled it Wayland Wrestling, A Great Life Experience. And it's amazing what you can remember. I can remember matches from 10, 15, 30 years ago. I can remember which kid had the red anklet and which kid had the green anklet. I mean, you remember everything, who the ref was. However, sometimes Ingrid might ask around lunchtime, "Did you take your senior vitamin this morning?" I says, "Beats me." But anyways, you can remember great things, and I did, and I spent days and days and hours writing the history of Wayland wrestling. And what I did is the Wayland wrestling top 10, top 10s. top 10 Wayland traditions, top 10 individual match victories, top 10 wackiest things that happened, top 10 nicknames, etc. And what I want to do is right now is refer to the last top 10, and that is what I call tributes. In other words, my thank yous for the people and the events and the things that made my stay in coaching so rewarding. And in light of what happened recently, last September, for instance, my feeling is now and forevermore, life is all about being thankful for everyone and everything positive in our lives, and especially about family. And to me, Wayland Wrestling is family, and to me, the wrestling community is family. My top 10 list, very quickly. Number 1 is Ingrid and my family. I've already mentioned that. Number 2 is the administration that I had the joy of working with. Coach Joe Valla from Amityville, Long Island, Coach R. Bruce McGill, or Superintendent R. Bruce McGill, that hired me, and he said at the time, I want to build a winning wrestling program here. Buzz Bowers is here, who is our athletic director and director of physical education, who was so supportive, and I'm not sure where Buzz is sitting, in the back. Been a Major League Baseball scout, and he's currently a Red Sox scout, and he's going to get us a couple more Nomars. And Dr. Zimmerman. Dr. Zimmerman has done so many great things for the sport of wrestling. He came to Wayland as a high school hockey player. He didn't know anything about high school wrestling, but when he finished, he was renowned at the national level. He served on the National High School Rules Committee. He was recognized by Scholastic Wrestling News as the National Administrator of the Year in high school wrestling. He's in the Massachusetts, the New England, and the New England Hall of Fame for wrestling. And the things that he has done for wrestling as a sport, and especially at Wayland, is legendary. Dr. Sharon Hennessy, who is here tonight, she was a captain's mom for 2 years. She was the principal at Wayland High School for many of the years that I was there. And her son Daniel was a two-year captain for us. And I often said the biggest thrill in my career was having the opportunity to work for 2 such dynamic educators and dynamic administrators as Dr. Zimmerman and Dr. Hennessy. And I say a special thank you to both of you. The parents, many of who are here tonight, bring a tear to my eye just thinking about the relationship that we built up and what the parents did for their kids through the sport of wrestling. The wrestlers, the young men and the young women that were involved in our program at Wayland, not only the stars, but the ones that were in the program for a great life experience. After 35 years, I still feel that it was the same book, just a different chapter every year. It was just new kids that were great kids, new parents that supported us so much. The families, the captains' moms, we asked so much. In 30 years at Wayland, we have 73 different families that had combinations of more than one child involved in our program, 73 different families. And I know that happens a lot in the sport of wrestlers, in the sport of wrestling. I'd like to mention my mentors, and I look around, and if there was ever a room full of mentors that I've been in before, tonight's it. There's so many people, the coaches, many that have been spoken about and did come up here and speak. The mentors in this room. But my mentors that I'd like to mention is Coach Bill Ferriel from Oneida High School in upstate New York, my high school wrestling coach, and Coach Doug Parker. These people made a difference. They were real people. They were dedicated people. They were loving people. They were motivated, and boy, could they ever motivate. And I loved them dearly. Coach Parker called last night. He wished he could be here, but couldn't make it. The coaches I competed against that were all mentors in their own right, people that did so much for so many kids, Tug Crozier, George Bossy, and Nick Zakili at Milford, and Dave Baldanza at Weston, and so many more. It was a thrill to coach against them. The Wayland coaches over the years, we had 15 in number that were assistant coaches and many more that helped out. And the current coaching staff at Wayland High School, Gary Chase is here, and Coach Parsesian and Sean and Lee, and Richie. I have to laugh because the last 86 matches at Wayland, they're 85-0-1. And there aren't a lot of people left in Wayland that know who Rick Moyer is. I'm convinced. Coach, congratulations, and I know you and the staff and the parents and the kids. Wrestling is just important at Wayland now as it ever was, and congratulations. To sum up my feelings, let me read a verse, and I'm not sure who the author is, and I'm not sure where I got it, but I'd like to read it because it sort of sums up my feelings about being involved in coaching. And it says, as years go by, memories of players and team turn golden, while golden trophies, scores, and news clips all fade away. The coach-player relationship is the one lasting trophy. Let me say that again. The coach-player relationship is the one lasting trophy. It is the final championship of the spirit whose importance far surpasses any other aspect of coaching. Thank you for a great life experience. Thanks.
I promise. I told every presenter tonight to keep it short, and every one of them squatted down a little bit up here. They did. I swear, I watched them. They did. I guess Joey and Maria called up. They need an annulment, Father. So after you get done with the benediction here, you got to go downstairs again. Father John McLaughlin, ladies and gentlemen.
I always keep it short, because I am. I just want to say something. We are blessed by God for having the wonderful people that are here tonight, and I think we should give them all a great hand for God's blessings. I know my brother wrestled for Boston University and under Carl, and he loved Carl. Well, I better do this. I know we have BU guys over there. I'll speak slowly so you'll understand me. I'm sorry, did I go to BC? Yeah, okay. I had to do it. I think also Rod Buttry was here tonight. Is Rod still here? Did he leave? He's hard to see, but, you know, I think that Rod's been a blessing and has had a difficult year, and I want to just acknowledge as he was facing adversity, he continued on, and we're blessed to have Rod as well. I also, one quick thing, because I know it's not quite 11, and I want to get you there. I want to tell you about great coaching, by the way. My first win was against Coach Testa. I'd like to dwell on that for a moment. I'll tell you what great coaching is. I had a first-year kid, Peter Marconi, wrestling his guy, the guy that had the team point taken off of him. My guy was a first-year wrestler, never wrestled in his life, first match. Goes out there against his guy headbutted him. My kid comes back with a broken nose. I just figured I'd plug it, stop it, you know. I had no idea what's going on. And my assistant coach is a football coach. He's starting to fix it, and he's got the nose all stopped bleeding, and we put Peter back out there. And I said, you think it was bad? He goes, I think it's broken. I said, you didn't tell me that. He said, well, I didn't think you wanted to know. So Peter went out there, and he shot right away on Brian Keene. Broke Brian Keene's nose. He got so mad, he threw his headgear. And we won. Great coaching. Anyways, we're going to end the night. As I said, we're blessed by God to have the wonderful people, the wonderful families, and the greatest fraternity in the world. And we ask Almighty God to hear our prayers tonight and take a little moment of silence for all of those who have gone before us in this great sport and those great mentors who have done so much for us. We ask Almighty God to bless you all, keep you safe, and bring you back here for another year, and for coaches to continue to do the great work that you have done. And we ask all this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
I don't remember what I had for breakfast, but I remember the name Brian Keene. Why is that? I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Please get your nominations in early. Hopefully we'll be back. We got this place booked for next year on a Saturday night, right, Coach? Yep. Saturday night. So we'll be back here for a year from now. Obviously, presenters will be pre-recorded and played over the PA system for timing's sake. The best thing of the night, Breen told me the bar's still open, so that's where I'm going. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you on behalf of everybody at this head table. Thank you very much. National Wrestling Hall of Fame, Massachusetts chapter. Good night, everybody, and drive safely.
Great job.